So today I wanted to talk a little bit about a very common question that I get asked by people who are out raising capital from investors is, how much due diligence do I need to do on my investor? Do I need to run a background check on every investor? So I wanted to cover that topic briefly today. So let me share my screen. All right, so investor due diligence. Do I need to run a background check on my investor? So when you start a bank account, they have a KYC or know your customer requirement where they have to do certain things in terms of getting your identification, getting information about you, your tax ID. So is there the same thing in when I'm out raising capital? So it's a frequently asked questions. So in terms of securities offering, which when you're raising capital, it's typically a securities offering, there may or may not be actual requirements in terms of the investor. Some of this comes down to, okay, what type of securities offering are you doing? And what are the suitability requirements for investing in that deal? For example, 506C under Reg D requires independent verification to make sure that the investor fits within the accredited status under Rule 501 in terms of the definition. So there is actually a separate requirement that you verify independently. But in a lot of cases, there's no separate requirement that you do actual due diligence on the investor. You may have a general obligation to make sure that your investor has sophistication financially so that they can understand the investment and the potential risks of that investment, that they could lose potentially all their money in a lot of cases. This is something securities regulators like the SEC look at is, at the end of the day, that's the overall policy is we want to protect investors so that you're not taking people on who don't have the financial wherewithal to know really what they're investing in and to understand all of the risks. So that's kind of a common sense reasonableness standard that you should apply when looking at your investors. And a lot of times there'll be a subscription agreement that they sign, an investor signs, or an investor suitability questionnaire that you have them fill out. And that's always a concern is how long does that questionnaire need to be? And there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. You want to get a general background on them, but you don't have to find out everything that you can potentially about them. So what are the areas to watch for? The investor identity. So this is basically, if you want to, you could take the steps of getting a copy of their photo ID or their passport. This is probably not something you need to worry about if all of your investors are US based. If you've got foreign investors and they're investing, you've never met them in person, you may want to get a copy of a photo ID just to verify their identity and also to verify their residence. So if they say that they live in the Cayman Islands, do they have something in writing, like a utility bill, a lease, a deed, something that shows that they actually do live in that country, that state, that location? So that's something you can do. It's, again, not necessarily required. What about investor liquidity? How did they get the money? In some cases, you don't need to ask this question, but if you've got somebody and you're using your common sense that the investor is 19 years old and the minimum investment is $50,000, as far as you know, they don't have a full-time job, and they're going to put $250,000 or $500,000 into a deal where they only had to put $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. Where is that money coming from? How did they get the money? Do they need to sell off a bunch of investments? Is it a trust fund they got from their family? Just general common sense, like, okay, is this someone who I would think would have this kind of money and that it's liquid and available to just at the drop of a hat put $1 million in? Or do they have to, give me a few days to liquidate my investment account, or I'm, just sold my business, wait for that to close and before I get to the wire transfer from escrow? So just general questions about, where did the money potentially come from? What about the funds that are coming in that they're sending to you? What bank is it coming from? Is it an internationally known or recognized bank that you would know? Or is it some bank you've never heard of in a foreign country? These are all things that could raise red flags where you want to dig a little deeper. Also, where's the bank located? So if you've got a bank in Iran it's the United Bank of Iran, or right now in Russia, there's certain areas where countries are on a blocked or sanctioned list by the US government. So you want to make sure that you're not dealing with someone who's located in one of those countries. And you can actually go to either the US Treasury or the Office of Foreign Asset Control and do a search online on their web search. It's free to look for both sanctions or blocked countries that might be on that list, where there could be, you're not allowed to take money from them or deal with them. Or also in terms of, where's the investor located? Are they also in that same country? You may not want to deal with them if they, at least right now, if they're located in Russia. You may not want to take money from Russian investors. That could cause issues with the US government. Also, what's your gut feeling? I mean, if it's somebody who claims they have a large portfolio, but they're wiring you money from China, from some bank you've never heard of, or from some country, some small country you've never heard of, you might want to dig a little deeper into that. And again, this is where if it gets to that point, you may want to say, hey, let's run a background check. You can do one online. They're not that expensive. You can also do a free web search through the US Treasury and the Office of Foreign Asset Control, where you can look up by individual, by company, and by country, and do a little quick search to see maybe that person could be on a specific list where they've engaged in money laundering before, and they're prohibited from doing any business in the US. And if you take money from them, that's going to cause an issue for you, because a red flag is going to go up. And then you may have taken money that is from money laundering or a terrorist country. And these are things that a subscription agreement, they might sign it and say, no, I'm not on any, blocked list. And this is not money from, terrorism, or it's not money that's been laundered through some criminal activity. But that's just, they're saying that to you in writing. But in some cases, you may want to go ahead and do a background check just to be sure. And what are the factors in deciding? Again, these are the things I just went over. Geography, where's the investor or the bank located? The source, where's the source of the money? Both location and how did they get it? Or at least a general sense of whether this person has liquid assets to be able to cover this. A gut feeling, common sense. What would a reasonable person in this situation think? If it seems, you get the feeling that something just doesn't seem right, do a little bit more digging just to be safe. Then also the risk. How much risk are you willing to take? Somebody who's cutting a $5 million check or wiring you $5 million, which is half of the amount of money you needed, are you willing to take that risk because they're putting up so much capital? It's something you're going to have to weigh. Or you may want to talk to your securities attorney or anyone else involved that you trust. They could provide you some advice. Again, these are just some general factors in deciding, but it's something that you probably want to run by a trusted advisor. All right. Thank you for listening. And we'll be sure to subscribe to your YouTube channel and to get more information.